What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've talked about Nintendo potentially raising prices for their games, what the cost of their Switch 2 system would be, but not as much about Nintendo Switch Online. Well, recently there was a bit of a price increase that has now people really thinking about what the future holds for the service, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony as 2025 has now started, which means, of course, people are looking to them when it comes to their game lineup, and it appears they are planning an event to happen here pretty soon. And PlatinumGames, they were in the news because of Ninja Gaiden 4, but they had another title they announced a while ago that has now actually disappeared off their website, which is bringing up a lot of questions, especially after Kamiya's departure. We'll talk about all of that and more. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below. And we're gonna start today with another update around BioWare and the Dragon Age Veilguard fallout, as it appears BioWare, as we had mentioned before, is becoming more agile, as they said, or really just smaller, people being reassigned to different parts of EA. And in fact, Jason Schreier actually published a report on Friday, you can see here. And this report says that after the release of Dragon Age the Veilguard, dozens of BioWare employees were told they were temporarily assigned to other projects within EA. This week at Twist, those temp assignments are now permanent transfers, and BioWare has shrunk. In fact, they're now less than 100 people total at BioWare, and I mean, the number could get even smaller than where it is now, depending, since it seems like going back to the drawing board with Mass Effect and development being in pre-production, and at that stage, you're really just trying to lay the foundation for that game's development, and then you start onboarding a bunch of people, I'm sure, from other divisions of EA when you're ready to go into full-scale production, which I don't think is going to happen for another couple of years. As I mentioned, I'm kind of thinking 2030 for Mass Effect, so yeah, unfortunate for Mass Effect fans having to wait so long, but them going back, bringing back some of the older team and stuff. I'm hopeful for Mass Effect, but we're not going to know much about this game for quite some time at this point. Also, it looks like another one of Microsoft's first-party Xbox games that they've already announced could be going multi-platform. I say could, but I think at this point we expect just about all of them to go multi-platform based on the recent actions and comments, but you can see this posted up. This was spotted by Extus, posted it over on their official account, mentioning that Perfect Dark, a job listing for it, said optimize and ensure the scalability of rendering functions to support multiple platforms and quality configurations, and as many people are doing now, they're kind of guessing, PS5 and Switch 2, and again, that's the thing right now, any of these games could indeed be going to the Switch 2, but I think we need to see more information about that system come April 2nd, since Microsoft could certainly be there up on stage just pointing at all these games that'll be released in like its launch window. And Call of Duty clearly being one of them, that's all been made completely public. And Perfect Dark, again, wouldn't shock me necessarily. Definitely, I would say it's coming to the PS5 because Microsoft is clearly targeting Sony's platform to make a bunch of revenue off of their games, becoming multi-platform, but the Switch 2 is still that wild card. But Perfect Dark, yeah, probably the next time we see it, don't be shocked if there's a PlayStation 5 logo, and who knows, maybe even a Nintendo logo on that end card. Oh, and Battlefield fans, it appears we're going to get some more information around some of the play tests that are going to be happening. We can see this posted up over on their official Reddit, saying tune in tomorrow at 5 p.m. CET, 8 a.m. Pacific time, so we're looking at, 11 a.m. Eastern time, for more on the upcoming Battlefield community testing program. So, to my understanding, it's going to be like kind of a closed testing process, so they're going to send emails out to people, I guess, for Battlefield and stuff who are much more involved in that community. But the thing, it's so funny, I realized this, like, wow, it's actually been more than 3 years now since Battlefield 2042 came out, and it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but now with EA, of course, looking for the future of Battlefield, to me, the biggest part, while they're doing a lot of testing, it's more or less just launching feature complete because it felt incredibly bare bones when 2042 came out. And honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing them go back to something like Bad Company and do a third entry there, but really it's just launch with a good amount of content because clearly it's something they support over time. And honestly, if they don't even want to do single player, make sure that multiplayer has a lot to it because people, once they realized how how bare bones it was then, they moved on pretty quick from it because there's just a lot of competition in that space. So here's hoping they're able to figure that aspect out, but at least when it comes to testing, put it in the hands of players and see what they think. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and a price increase for Nintendo Switch Online. Now, this is happening in certain regions around the world, which we can see this over on Nintendo Everything. Says Nintendo Switch Online seeing price increase in some Latin American regions. Now, they list a few here like Brazil, Mexico, Argentina. I also noticed that Game Rant says the list of countries that will be affected by the price adjustment reportedly includes Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. So it seems like the way that a lot of these places are finding this information is legitimately because emails are showing up in customers' inboxes, and it's just warning them that, hey, price is going to go up this much. Kind of like we get that dreaded Netflix email, what almost feels like annually now. Am I right here? Where it's like, oh yeah, prices are going up for Netflix, and now it's $25 or something for the Netflix streaming package, and it's pretty annoying to see that, but it just seems like a consistent thing with subscription services. It's happened with Microsoft, it's happened with Sony. So I'm not too surprised to see this with Nintendo, but this, I don't think, is the big price increase that is coming here in the future, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, most of the price increases here we can see. Nintendo says that if you're in any of these regions, if you have subscribed or re-upped your subscription by February 28th, you won't immediately be affected because you pay for a year at a time. Technically, well, most people do. I should say it's probably the right way to go if you're looking to save almost significant money, considering the bundle deal for the year is typically worth it. But March 1st, these prices will go into effect, which you can see listed up here, and it's a price increase anywhere from 10 to 25%. As I was going through here and comparing it to some of the exchange rates, that does seem to be the biggest reason, or really the only reason I would say at this time, for these price increases to kind of match up to currency exchange rates across the world as fluctuations happen. So having said that, it's easy to explain this, but I think in the sense of their next generation device, I think pricing is going up just across the board almost. Like, it hasn't been discussed as much because we're so focused currently on the price of the console, which $400 to $450 is about where people are landing, and I think that's probably fair to be between $400 and $450. But what about, say, Nintendo Switch Online? Will it stay at $50 or so, depending on where you're in the world, for the expansion pack? Will it jump to $60 or $70? That wouldn't surprise me. Will we see price increases for games from $60 to $70? I think most people believe that would be a thing. And then finally, would we see accessory prices go up? Do you know one of the biggest things that stuck out to people, and I saw this a lot, a lot of the frustration complaints even online for pricing wasn't really around the system. It was around the Joy-Cons, because you would buy a pair of them to make one controller right in the grip, and it was $80 for that. Nintendo sold it as, oh, it's $50 for one or $80 for two. Is it possible that whatever these new Joy-Cons we've already seen that are certainly larger than the current Joy-Cons and seemingly have more of a feature set, could they be $100 for the pair or, $60 for one? That's something else to consider. Accessories typically is where a lot of these companies do make high margin. And Nintendo is no secret to that. It's no secret to Nintendo, as they do that with a lot of their stuff. Think of amiibos. They love to accessorize. That's one of their favorite things. So something else to consider there. But this, I would say, pretty basic or almost standard change in pricing in different regions to accommodate the differences in currency exchange rates just got that conversation going. So let me know what you think about that down below in the comments, and what you think is most likely to jump in price: Nintendo Switch Online, accessories, or even the games themselves. Next up, let's talk about Sony and how they seem like they're just about ready to line up the year, or at least the first half of the year, with a state of play. And in fact, we may now know the week that it's going to be happening, because Nate decided to reply to somebody on Twitter, and that was enough to get people going crazy. So let's take a look. This is posted up over on Insider Gaming, where they say, according to Nate, the next PlayStation State of Play is in February. He's already mentioned this before. I think he's thrown it around in different podcasts and stuff. That's not necessarily new. And in fact, it's expected because there's basically a state of play all the time in February, right? So it goes on to say, with the insider teasing that it could be on Valentine's Day. When asked about the next state of play and whether or not it will be at the beginning or end of the month, Nate replied, "What does your heart tell you?" I don't know why Nate has to like speak in these riddles and question. He answers a question with a question. Hey, you know what? That's Nate, the kind of guy who refers to oneself as one. But anyway, with Nate basically referencing the week of Valentine's Day, which I believe the 14th is on a Friday, that does seem like a good week for them to have a state of play of some kind with third parties and first party, although I'm kind of expecting a lot of third party presence at their state of play. And if you consider the fact that that week is the same where they will do their quarterly earnings release, so they'll also be releasing information to investors, and typically, as we just saw with Nintendo, where they decided, we're going to put out a fairly brief trailer for the hardware and one little spot for a game with Mario Kart that naturally would get investors very excited as they head into their earnings release this week. You can expect Sony maybe to talk about some of their games, or at least their slate of releases coming up this year. And thinking about it, third party, sure, like Metal Gear Solid Delta, would not be surprised if that was shown with a release date, as Sony, well, it was with Microsoft's show as well. I'm sure many people out there think Metal Gear Solid and they think Sony. It's like, sure. Resident Evil, there's a Resident Evil 9 floating around out there somewhere. It seems like it's about time for Capcom to make that announcement, and they have typically aligned with Sony. Monster Hunter Wilds, I know there's going to be an event with Capcom here in the next day or two or so, but like, why wouldn't you also have a presence at State of Play? It seems like something they consistently do. And then you look at their first party stuff, Ghost of Yotei, or even just like Death Stranding 2 with them and Kojima having that released seemingly this year. And why not throw Fair Games in there? Not like there's any pressure at all on the live service push from Sony that has quickly fallen apart over the last year or so at this point. So here's hoping Fair Games can make some sort of a splash, although we haven't seen it in a while, so unless they drastically change stuff, I'm not really sure what's going on there. But yeah, expect a state of play most likely next week ahead of their earnings release, that happening on the 13th of February. So maybe the day before, or even, I guess, the day of. Next up, let's talk about PlatinumGames and a very interesting story that's picked up here because it has to do with Project GG, which has been a big mystery. And originally when it was announced back in 2020, so it's actually been about 5 years now, because it was like the beginning of 2020 that was announced, as well as investment from Tencent to help make this possible, because PlatinumGames, while they will work with other companies to make and build games, they don't actually own many intellectual properties at all. They're like smaller ones, really, like Wonderful 101, Soul Cresta, I guess. Those kind of games, those IPs are ones that they own at this time. Ninja Gaiden 4, they're just working with Koei Tecmo, Team Ninja, Microsoft, and helping get that to the finish line. But Project GG was supposed to be their big push. Live service, the whole thing. And now it appears that it's just disappeared off of their website. We can see this posted up. This is over on Video Games Chronicle. It says fans noticed this week that Platinum had updated its games page, reducing its list of 22 games down to just 9. So we can see it here, what it looks like. Notably, the web pages for the removed games are still live, including Mad World, Soul Cresta, and even canceled games such as Babylon's Fall, World of Demons, which that is a shame. I wonder if they'll be able to bring that back. It was on Apple Arcade and then it just kind of disappeared. So maybe that is getting a re-release for just all platforms. We'll see. But the former Project GG URL now redirects to the Platinum homepage, as in they have like scrubbed it from their website or just redirected it and pulled it down for now. Maybe working to do something with it. Now, this was described as the climax to Kamiya's superhero trilogy, but one problem: Kamiya's not there anymore. They formed a new studio, and he's now working on the sequel to Okami 2. So kind of an issue. And people have wondered if that was actually the reason that he ended up leaving. Was Project GG just kind of turned into something that he wasn't expecting? Once they said they were going to shoot for like this, it was going to be this live service thing, then I thought to myself, that doesn't sound like a great idea for Platinum to attempt. But that can also be the most lucrative if you get it right. And if they're going to take a big swing with the backing of Tencent, you might as well really shoot for the stars at that point, and I guess they were doing that here with GG. But it's creating a new IP. I know this was part of like the culmination of his hero games and stuff, but creating really what was going to be seen as a new IP is already hard enough. And then to also tackle on live service stuff that people are kind of down on right now just seems strange. That seems like something you would attempt later on after multiple entries have, I'd say, gained enough goodwill from gamers for you to kind of try it as an offshoot thing. I don't. To me right now, Platinum, at least they have Ninja Gaiden 4, because otherwise they kind of seem like they're spiraling a bit. So, hey, we'll see how Ninja Gaiden 4 comes out, and if Project GG ever reappears, or if that's something that's like gone now and they just never mention it again. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft with their Xbox strategy, how it's sort of gone now, and SEGA, because people do keep comparing it, like the two of them, especially with what we saw SEGA do as they exited the hardware market, with the Dreamcast being their last major system, and what's going on with Microsoft where they're selling less and less Xboxes and they're making that multi-platform push, because Shawn Layden actually had quite a bit to say about this. I pulled a few quotes here we can see. This was also posted up over on Video Games Chronicle, saying multi-platform is a strategy, particularly in a world where the cost of development is increasing so dramatically. We've seen it before. I was in the business when SEGA brought their Dreamcast titles to PS2. In time then, SEGA became a software-only company and have had a great transformation in that sense. So it does have historical precedence. Okay, so I don't know if Microsoft people right now, Xbox fans, want to hear that comparison. It's like, oh yeah, they're kind of like SEGA. It's like, there was a point in time where Sonic was like shoulder to shoulder with Mario. If you were around playing games in the 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially during that Super Nintendo Genesis era. It was like Sonic, Mario. Like they were just right next to each other. Do you still kind of have that now in gaming? I guess people can look to the movie, like the theater, and be like, wow, look at what Sonic has become. And okay, yeah, sure. Like Sonic 3, awesome movie. It's grossing a ton of money from the box office, but then you look over it, oh yeah, here comes Super Mario Brothers. Over $1 billion, no sweat. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, Mario is still above Sonic, just pretty much across the board. And when SEGA left the hardware market, they didn't exactly go into like a great place. They were just trying to figure things out, and yeah, they were putting software everywhere. In fact, people looked at the original Xbox, kind of the successor almost to the Dreamcast, and it's funny to say that because now we're saying, oh yeah, Sega and Microsoft are kind of similar paths here with the way Microsoft's going. The only difference to me though, Microsoft, much, much larger. Like significantly so when it comes to their software offerings, the financial backing. They don't need to get out of hardware because it became too expensive all of a sudden for them. They can keep making hardware and sell it to, like they could sell 10 million Xbox systems for a generation. If that software is continuing to churn and make them a bunch of money on all platforms, that's good enough for them. And I do think the licensing around the Xbox name and OS is the strategy for next generation. So maybe Asus makes a bunch of them, maybe MSI makes a bunch, Lenovo, and all of a sudden you add them all up and it's still at that 30 to 40 million mark. Then I think Microsoft will be pretty happy. So that's the biggest issue right now. It's a major unknown for next generation with Microsoft because they keep talking about how hardware will continue to be a thing. Let's see what their plan is, their strategy for the successor to the Xbox Series, and then we can reevaluate this entire situation with them. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, which I want to take a bit of a temperature check around the Xbox hardware, where people's confidence is right now with like, what's Xbox gonna look like in 10 years? Will they still make a console? Well, we can see the results. Yeah, 80% say no. Okay, well, there you go. 20% say yes. I mean, look, it's difficult to see Microsoft continue to report 20% down, 10% down, 30% down, 30% down with hardware, and then you go, okay, how many systems are they selling this year? Did they sell 3 million consoles like in 1 year? Because then you go, oh, that seems dire, because they're also expecting it to drop another 30% the following year. And when do you get closer and closer to selling like 1 million consoles in a year? That would then become a problem, right? So that's I understand. I understand why the poll is like that right now. There's just not a lot of confidence, and it's going to be up to Microsoft to show people why you would still want to buy an Xbox if their games exist pretty much everywhere else. If everything is an Xbox, what's the point in buying Microsoft's Xbox specifically, and that's what they'll have to convince us about again going into next generation. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Austin, who says, hopefully Metroid Prime 2 and 3 Remastered are announced at the February Nintendo Direct, because I would really like to play the whole series and not the first and fourth games. I would be shocked if Metroid Prime 2 and 3 don't make their way to the Switch before Metroid Prime Beyond comes out. It goes along with the trend Nintendo has had where they might put out a new game like Pikmin 4. Okay, here's Pikmin 4. Yeah, also Pikmin 1 and 2. We're going to do those as well. And I guess it doesn't technically need to come out physically before, because they've been doing the thing where they'll drop it digitally right away. Shadow drop it. Though, yeah, then a physical copy will come later. So they could do that with Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Could they shadow drop those at this apparent February Direct? I guess. And then that would get it ahead of time for Metroid Prime 4, Metroid Prime Beyond. But it just lines up how they're treating a lot of these franchises that are more storied with their history, whether it's Xenoblade, as I mentioned with Pikmin. It's like, yeah, you get a lot of those older titles, bring them to the Switch, and it has everything there ready to go. And of course, it would get people prepared for Metroid Prime Beyond. Now, I am also wondering if the Direct isn't this week, could it be next week? And then we have a State of Play and a Direct and earnings and stuff from Sony all in like the span of 4 or 5 days, because that would be quite busy. So we'll see how all this lines up for February. Just a few weeks here. Should start hearing about a bunch of game releases, of course, to start off the first half of 2025. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to check in to see how the PlayStation 3 online store is doing in 2025, because it's still active, and there are some ridiculous deals there, especially when it comes to some high-priced PS1 titles. I'll leave that right below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.